I do a bunch of mastering for Travis Ferrens. He's a mixer out in LA, but he recently posted this video. So I wanted to film my reaction on it for you guys, and I want you to let me know in the comments, do you think mastering is dead?
The music tech industry has been taking aim at mastering engineers for years. With tools like Ozone, online platforms like Lander, and what seems to be daily advancements in AI, is the battle finally coming to an end?
When tech and industry are aligned with the goals of the community, that's really healthy, and I think that's what iZotope's doing. A company like Lander, however, their goals and their alignment of their community aren't mastering engineers, they're artists. So they're serving artists, they're not serving mastering engineers. Do they bridge that gap? Okay, so does Lander overtake mastering engineers or kill mastering engineers? In my opinion, it doesn't, because it's serving the needs of artists at a given point of time in their career. And then as artists develop and they engage professionals in their craft, they will start to recognize the value difference or the value proposition that the two offer aren't necessarily the same.
I might not be a household name like Manny or CLA, but I do make my living mixing records and have well over 250 million streams to my credit. And because I'm not one of those household names, and because I'm not mixing label projects every day, when it comes to mastering, budgets can vary wildly, and so my mixes are being mastered by a wide range of engineers. Now, I obviously have my preferences for favorite engineers, but I'm not always going to be involved in the decision. And over the last few years, I've noticed an increasing trend in just plain bad mastering. If a project is not done by one of the top mastering houses or by one of my preferred engineers, then it's starting to become more likely that I just don't really like the end result. And
as technology becomes more accessible, more people can call themselves mastering engineers, that bar is only going to get lower and lower and lower. But in the same respect, the more mastering engineers who come about, there's also more competition. There's more competition to do well, and there's going to be engineers who really push their craft, and that's only going to push the top tier higher and higher and higher, make them more valuable for the projects they engage with. And that's what I've noticed in my craft. I've been privy to, access engineers who are exceptional at what they do, and they keep pushing the envelope. One name in mastering that comes to mind with this is Luca Predolesi. I've seen his work develop over the last decade at an incredible pace. And he just always raises the bar in a sense. And that's sort of the echelon I'm trying to focus on working with and towards as a mastering engineer myself, because you keep pushing that envelope higher. So more people coming in, people at the bottom who aren't doing great work, that's going to get much worse and worse because of accessibility. And the people at the top who are doing really great work, that's going to get better and better because there's more competition and more of an incentive for them to really drive what they're doing home.
if you're a mastering engineer, you probably currently hate me, but you're not going to feel that way at the end. Trust me. Now, because I know there is at least one person asking, what is mastering? And I also think the backstory is important to my point. Here is the world's fastest breakdown of the history of audio mastering. If you want to skip ahead, there are chapter markers down below. So up until about 1948, recording was done in what was called direct-to-disc recording. The engineer would mic the band with a very limited number of inputs. That band would then balance themselves while playing live in the room because there were no overdubs and there were very few microphones. The engineer would then capture that recording, cutting it directly to vinyl with a lathe as the band played. This all began to change when Ampex released the Model 200 tape machine, which provided the ability to record to magnetic tape, resulting in an increase in sonic fidelity. And now, because that tape machine would never be a consumer playback device, that recording eventually had to make it back to the medium of choice at the time, which was vinyl. This was the advent of a new type of engineer called the transfer engineer, whose job would transform over the years to what we now think of as a mastering engineer. The transfer engineers would apply corrective EQ to a recording to be sure that the needle would not pop out of the record because of too much low end. They would also adjust levels to be sure that all the program material that needed to be fit on a side was able to do so. As technology progressed,
the physical limitations of vinyl, the physical limitations of it mean the decisions you need to make tonally, dynamically, how hot you cut it, actually become musical decisions. So the technical limitations dictate the musicality of that medium, because you can't have stupidly panned things or wide sub basses or very aggressively compressed signals. You have to think musically, and it just so happens that on that medium it allows you to do that. So those sort of limitations drove the character and quality of those records.
So did the job of the mastering engineer. They began to take a more creative role in the process, adding dynamic processing and additional EQ to enhance the choices already made by the mixing engineer. Then, when digital came on the scene in the 80s, the increased headroom opened the door for masters to become louder and louder. And anybody that has ever listened to music knows that louder is always better.
He's right. Louder is better. I probably shouldn't say that. Louder is different. Let's just say that. Let's keep going.
So with that in mind, every artist wanted their CD to be the loudest, most exciting CD on the desk of the local radio DJ. This was the dawn of the loudness wars, which would continue into the digital and streaming era, despite the fact that the DSPs employ loudness normalization.
Okay, so really interesting fact about the loudness wars with CDs. I was listening to this podcast episode with Greg Calby, and he was actually talking about how back at Sterling, with the Sony disc, like there was a unit. I can't remember the name of the unit. I'll put it up on the screen.
Matter of fact, if you sent something out that was too loud, it would get rejected. At Sterling, we had a guy who actually figured out a way to make the Sony machine that everybody used to transfer for the manufacturing copies. There was a trigger light that would go on when something was over the limit. And he figured out a way while we were making our tapes that he disabled the trigger light. So that we started making the loudest ones in that era. They were actually, they were loud, but they were never rejected. So, and I don't know when everybody figured out that we were doing something like that, but the loud thing was really important.
Pretty cool to think at the time they were thinking outside the box like that to sort of break the tools they were using so they could create something different. Pretty unique.
So that's how we got here. But where is here? Here is that unfortunately the average musician's understanding of what mastering does is summed up into two words: louder, brighter. And while they're
I think on the technical front, what people hear, that's an easy way to sum it up. The third adjective I'd add to this, Travis, is better. Okay? A lot of artists generally mastering, because it can be a little bit mystical, they assume because there's this prestige behind the process that mastering will make their music better. Even though it doesn't, the music is only as good as the music will ever be. There's also that third perception I think some people have.
Maybe a lot of truth to that statement. I think it's also the reason that there's a lot of lackluster mastering going around. And this is where
I agree. Because anybody can make anything louder, anything can make anything brighter, and it's going to be perceived as feeling better, but it might not necessarily be it. And this was a bit of a humbling lesson getting Ian Shepard's Perception AB plugin, so I could quickly AB in sessions, and it made me rethink some of the decisions I was making on my masters. So yeah, louder and brighter is not always better.
Technology comes into play. As I mentioned earlier, the tools of mastering are becoming more democratized by the day. A process that was once as analog as it could possibly be has become almost entirely digital, even for some of the top engineers.
It's interesting he says the tools which... Let me just repeat that.
It's also the reason that there's a lot of lackluster mastering going around. And this is where technology comes into play. As I mentioned earlier, the tools of mastering are becoming more democratized by the day.
The tools of mastering are becoming more democratized by the day. Interesting. Could we say they're being democratized, or the ideas behind mastering are being centralized into the tools? There's a centralized interest in there to sell people what they want, not necessarily what they need. So it's decentralized in the sense that things are accessible, but it's centralized in the interest of this. I think because it's so easy to make these tools, it's just become its own marketplace or commerce system of selling people dreams of louder and brighter because it's easy, it's accessible, it's what people want. They can create the software, put it out to people, and it's money in. There are developers who I will name and back. TDR, Tokyo Dawn Labs, their interest is in creating great tools. Tone Projects, their interest is in creating great tools. Isotope, Ozone, this one might get me in trouble by some of my subscribers, but having dealt with them, in terms of the development of their products, their interest is in making great tools. That to me is important. The commerce side of it is another thing where I think sort of blurs that line.
A process that was once as analog as it could possibly be has become almost entirely digital, even for some of the top engineers. Emulations of high-end gear have become so good that people are selling their analog and going digital, and plugins like Isotope Ozone have gone from what a producer A process that was once as analog as it could possibly be has become almost entirely digital, even for some of the top engineers. Emulations of high-end gear have become so good that people are selling their analog and going digital.
This is true. I sold my Crane Song Ibis. I sold my Dangerous Convert AD+. I am keeping the analog gear I have because these tools are fun to work with. If I was building a studio tomorrow, would I be getting them? I need to be honest with you guys. I would not. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't. I enjoy using them though, and I still use them on masters and get great results with them. It's fun running through analog gear, but I just wouldn't.
Plugins like Isotope Ozone have gone from what a producer might throw on to make a rough mix to being the actual mastering processor for a final release.
Now, I don't think that's bad. I don't think it's bad somebody has, a mixing engineer has access to a tool to author what an artist has wholeheartedly signed off on. And if the mixing engineer is confident in it and serving the interest of the artist, and confident meaning they know that it's going to perform out in the world, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I genuinely don't. It's when the interests of the records are compromised because you're just slamming it through a limiter to make it sound louder so the client's happy and they sign off on it, then there's an issue.
And then there's a whole new set of tools that I'm just going to call algorithmic tone shapers. Things like Golfoss, which are applying thousands of little EQ changes to a mix so that a frequency response more closely resembles some predetermined curve.
Yeah. These are tools. I think the concept of the tools are good. Like I use Clarity and Stabilizer in Ozone. The concept of the tools are good. The decisions you make with them are what define how good they are. Okay, that's important. The decisions you make with the tools are what defines how good a tool is. On its own in isolation, not that great, these tools. The decisions you make with them and some creative decisions I've seen people make with them, especially with, I think it's split EQ and other things like that, that's where the magic happens.
For better or for worse. And so the increase of access to mastering grade tools, combined with this oversimplified assumption of what mastering is, I think is actually threatening to ruin mastering altogether. Why do I think that? I think that because we're defining what we will buy as mastering. We buy louder and we buy brighter.
I think there's some merit to that argument. We buy louder, we buy brighter, we buy the result. I'm a culprit in it because I push out the result, especially on the channel, to educate people. This is how you get this. This is how you get X, Y, Z. This is how you get this. This is the tool you need for this. That's not healthy in a sense in general. I don't think I have to own that part of it, but I also think he stepped on something there. And that's what I was speaking about before, the commerce side of things. It's easy to sell people on what they already want. It's more difficult to educate people and change people's mind about what they need to know. And that's sort of like where I'm transitioning my channel here, or my engagement with the community, is sharing people what's happening in the studio, what's actually going on, the things that I'm failing at, the things that I'm winning at, so that way people can see the real, like it pulls down the smoke in the mirrors, they can see what's actually happening, which I think is important. The thing is, you have to give credit to individuals. I think human beings in a big pool of people, there are always going to be ones that are just going to go buy the silver bullet solution. But then within there are going to be outliers who are critical thinkers, and those critical thinkers will always engage to push the envelope, and how they push the envelope is typically how they engage in their craft through real life experience. And those are the people that I think are going to carry the torch into the realm for the next set of mastering engineers who you're going to see on major records over the next 10 to 20 years.
I can take Ozone 11, throw it on my mix bus, and hit Master Assistant. And I will get something that is for sure louder and for sure brighter, but will it be better? Or would I consider it mastered? So far, in my experience, definitely not. And don't get me wrong, the individual tools within Ozone are amazing, and I use them every day. But I've yet to hit that button, and here's something I would consider keeping. I actually think it was more useful years ago when it did less. There'd always be like a couple dynamic EQ points I might keep, but now it sounds like an inexperienced mastering engineer that's just doing something because they think they have to.
This is actually really interesting about the Ozone algorithm, and I actually got to bring it up with their team at some point, is that it's got predetermined sort of, let's say, markers for the dynamics, for the overall tone, for the overall width and whatnot. But something I've noticed it doesn't do well is recalibrate those markers. So I'll give an example here, and this is anecdotal. So let's say it listens to a mix and it goes, oh, this mix needs to meet this EQ, this compressor, this EQ, this dynamic, and this stereo width number. So for the EQ, it boosts at 2 dB in the top end. And then for wider, it goes, well, it needs to be a little bit wider, so it makes it wider again. But what's actually happened is it's made it even more brighter than it was originally. So what would be interesting to see if Ozone could do this, and this is good for you guys if any people at Isotope are listening. After the EQ, after each processor, it takes a new reading. So it applies the EQ, it takes a new reading and goes, oh, we did want to make it wider, but if we make it wider, it's going to also make it brighter. So let's instead go, let's duck down that EQ and then make it brighter. Because what I'm noticing, especially when it has 6, 7, 8 modules, because I'm always testing these tools, is that from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, it might have had one intention at the start with the first plugin, but then by the time it gets to the end, there are so many compromising moves for the tone or the dynamics or the stereo field that they sort of contradict themselves in a series of a chain.
So what about the fully AI side of this? Before filming this video, I tossed a mix into Lander as well as the Waves online mastering platform. Both came back, you guessed it, louder and brighter. But neither came close to the human master that had been done previously. Now, all three were competitively loud. All three were brighter than the mix was, but the human master was changed thoughtfully.
I'm curious, Travis, was that my human master you'd used? This is my ego coming in check. Like, if you used one of mine, that'd be really cool. If you didn't, that's okay. But I just want to know. I need that little bit of ego boost there. Sorry, man.
There was vocal clarity without harshness. There was a glue and like a life, but there was minimal compression or limiting artifacts. It's clear that the human master was done in support of what was already there. And that's what mastering is about.
That is right. We're listening to the music and understanding the nuance of it. An algorithm is good to an extent, but the actual nuance of what's going on, even when there's like unison hits. I love unison hits because when the whole band comes in and smacks together, it punches hard. Even understanding the musicality of what's being performed informs your decisions on what you do dynamically and tonally. It's not necessarily just a calculation like an algorithm.
Mastering has never been about making changes. It's been about making the right changes. A transfer engineer in 1948 did not EQ the low end unless they had to. That's the spirit of mastering that engineers have carried for the last 80 years, and that's what should continue to carry for the next 80.
I think, Travis, it will continue to carry. There are a lot of interested minds in mastering who want to push the needle and drive, and a lot of them are probably awesome engineers who are subscribed to my newsletter. That's just a shameless little plug. So if you're not, you should probably go in the description, sign up to my newsletter. It's the best space for mixing and mastering pros. But these are curious minds. There are curious minds out there still. Not everybody's just looking for a silver bullet solution to blanket everything with. There are people pushing the envelope.
Every step of the record-making process has always been, or should always be, about honoring the previous steps. Taking the vision of everybody that touched a project before you and supporting it. And that's why this technology-driven era of matching a specific EQ curve or doing something for the sake of doing something is, in my opinion, hurting mastering as a whole. So to answer the question, is honoring the previous steps? Taking the vision of everybody that touched a project before you and supporting it. And that's why this technology-driven era of matching a specific EQ curve or doing something for the sake of doing something is, in my opinion, hurting mastering as a whole.
Yes and no. I don't think it's hurting mastering. I think it's exposing more of what works and what doesn't work. Because when people try these things, like matching an EQ and their mix doesn't line up, it's helping them learn about their mixes. And I think that can be a helpful tool. I don't think it's a solution for final mastering, but I know there are people who use Ozone Master Assistant on their mix bus. It spits something out and it goes, it should have more low end, less of this, less of that. They'll tweak it in the mix and then they'll turn the Master Assistant off. So I think as a tool, it's a good learning thing. I don't think it's directly hurting mastering, but anyway.
So to answer the question, is mastering dead? Do you still need to pay for mastering? The answer is simple. If you are price shopping for the most economical way to make something louder and brighter, then to you, mastering is kind of dead. You can easily use a one-click mastering plugin or any AI platform and likely be satisfied. But if you're looking
being satisfied, and this is my take, satisfied is okay. Anybody can be satisfied, but the problem is satisfied isn't greatness. Okay, if you're an artist, if you're somebody putting music together, like Steve Jobs putting together the first Macs, every detail matters. So making sure that it's freaking perfect, every stage from the production of the mix to the master should be in your interest. And if it's not in your interest, it's very hard to go far in this industry because how you do one thing tends to be how you do everything. So even your mastering, you should be, even if you're doing it yourself, you should be pushing to get the best sound out of your record. Just clicking a button and being happy with louder and brighter and satisfied, quote unquote, means that you can be satisfied with every other aspect of your music career, with the okay AI that the cover art was generated from the okay publicity, from the okay streams that satisfied you. But that's not necessarily going to be a main driver for you to grow.
For one last collaborator, if you are willing to search for a mastering engineer that fits your sonic tastes and wants to support your vision, then to you, mastering is very much still alive and very much worth it. The more technology improves and continues to democratize, the more important each person's individual sonic taste is going to become.
100%. I said this at the start of the video. The more people jumping into the marketplace of doing mastering means there are going to be huge outliers at the top, huge outliers at the bottom, and, you know, the individual, like, he touches on how individualistic it is, and I do appreciate that and understand that. But it also, the more people coming on board, the more tools available, it spreads the playing field. There's going to be huge performers who are really exceptional at mastering because they're putting in the time, they're putting in the effort. It's super competitive to be exceptionally good at what you do, and there's going to be a big bottom out as well.
You'll be able to get a technically great mix or a master from plenty of people, or maybe even
plenty of people. That's the center of that bell curve distribution.
Plenty of machines. But what is the X factor that makes a collaboration really click? That's what you should be looking for in a mastering engineer or for anybody that's going to work on your project.
Anybody. The X factor. Like I said, if the way you do one thing is how you do most things, okay? Is how you do everything. I don't think I said that. That's a quote I'm just quoting. You know, just because you have a great mastering engineer doesn't mean that you should skimp out on your mixing engineer or your producer or how you record it. Every aspect of your project. Find the best people, the best team. And if you're a solo person, that's perfectly fine, but don't skimp on any part of that process. Do the best recording you can with the tools you have available. Do the best mix you can with the tools you have available. Add that passion, add that drive into what you're doing.
Because the reality is, what's happening in mastering at the moment is going to happen in every aspect of the music industry. The advancement of tools is going to even the playing field pretty much everywhere. The thing that will separate you from others in the industry is no longer going to be your specific skills. It's going to be your taste and your sonic identity.
Yeah, I think skills, and this is where maybe I don't disagree, but it's sort of like I see it differently. Skills, sonic identity, sort of play hand in hand. Your ability to craft your own sonic identity, to craft the way you approach masters and deliver results for your clients is directly tied to your skills, and the development of both tend to run in parallel.
That's what we're ultimately going to all get hired for. And when you do get hired, if you feel like you're struggling to figure out what the best rate to charge for your services is, then you'll probably want to check out this video next.
So there you have it. Travis made some really, really good points. In my opinion, is mastering dead? No, it definitely isn't. Is there a lot more going on in mastering? I think there is. There's more activity as a mastering engineer, whether it's for new tools, new discussions, new techniques people are exploring. There's a whole bunch of work out there for mastering engineers, which I think, especially new engineers coming up, appreciating and acknowledging. And that's more because, and the more work that's becoming available for mastering engineers is because the accessibility to those tools are allowing artists, mixers, producers to produce a greater quantity and explore new ideas, which are introducing their own unique problems in mastering, which were never available before. Because you've got to remember, and this is just a bit of anecdote and then we'll wrap up. when I started as an assistant, all the stuff coming into the studio was coming from mixing engineers, professional mixing engineers, or producers. Very little was done by the artists themselves. So you knew that kind of those mixing engineers and producers understood the technical limitations. They sort of stayed within their lane. Now, because artists are getting involved and producers are producer artists, they're doing wacky things in mixes that I've never heard before. And sometimes it sounds amazing. And as a mastering engineer, it's a challenge or a puzzle that's very new and unique to solve. So it's a fun time to be a mastering engineer. It's not dead. And thanks, Travis, for a really cool video. I hope you enjoyed my reaction. And until next time, take care.